David Parker.
The problem for New Zealand is it's not working. Minister Collins, those 10 targets, not one of them was an economic target by which you will be held to account. 5 years ago, your government came to power
Order, it's
pledging...
not the Speaker's government.
Mr Speaker, 5 years ago, the National Government came to power pledging that they would stop waving goodbye to our loved ones. 4 years ago, thank you, Maggie. 4 years. Since then, what's happened? Record numbers of New Zealanders are moving to Australia. 158,000 more New Zealanders have left. In the last year, the largest number ever in the history of New Zealand, 53,000. The saddest bit of that, 40% of them are between the age of 18 and 30. 40%, we are losing a generation of young people who should be having hope and opportunity in New Zealand. Instead, they're choosing to put their shoulder to the wheel of the Australian economy. What's it like in the regions? 1,200 people from Whangarei, 460 people from Nelson. This is just 1 year and just to Australia. Mr Speaker, why is it happening? We heard Mr English say, oh, it's Greece. These people aren't going to Australia because of Greece's problems. They're going because of New Zealand's problems. We've had record terms of trade. We've had booming economies in Australia and China, our two largest trading partners, plus booming terms of trade. And despite that, record numbers of people are leaving because they've got no opportunity in New Zealand. Why? Because this government has got no adequate vision for our economy. Nothing that's going to improve the job prospects. Nothing that's going to address this housing crisis that we've got in Auckland and unaffordable housing for young people. We've had mining in national parks. Well, that didn't work. We've had cycleways. Then this year, we've had asset sales. The biggest part of the government's agenda is asset sales. Changing who owns what already exists does nothing to improve the output of New Zealand economy. What it does do is increase the government deficit by $100 million per annum. What it does do is increase residential power prices and the current account deficit. And then we had the zero budget. The zero budget where the centrepiece was improving educational outcomes by increasing class sizes. Well, that went down as it should have. It was another example of ineptitude. Ineptitude that we've had in ACC. We've had Dr Smith fall on his sword. We've had Mr John Judge tossed out unceremoniously. Whatever you might think of some of the things he did, he was treated shabbily by this government. We've lost the head of work and income who moved back, giving 2 days' notice before heading back from Australia. We've had Mr Key's chair of the electorate, Stephen McElrea, in charge of New Zealand On Air, influencing programming. We've had the T-tape disgrace where the Prime Minister and John Banks called in the police to use against the media during an election after their publicity stunt went wrong. And then we've got the same Mr Banks now not even being prosecuted, despite the fact that he was the person that asked for the donation, he was the person that picked up the envelope, and he was the person who was responsible for the declaration that said that he didn't know who donations were from. Is that believable? Well, that's a jury question, and we're never going to know because Mr Banks is not being prosecuted, and because the Prime Minister stands behind him and leans on him in order to maintain his wafer-thin parliamentary majority. Mr Speaker, we've got record numbers of New Zealanders going to Australia. We've got the government having put off the agenda the important economic steps, a neutral investment signal into the economy through a capital gains tax, increases to the pool of capital available to improve labour productivity, to grow our exports that we need through Universal KiwiSaver, through a research and development tax credit to direct investment into the innovative, productive part of our economy. These changes the government has said they will not move on, and yet these are the very changes we need as a country. We need fiscal responsibility moving forward, and yet the government says they're going to ignore the looming superannuation problem, despite the fact that within 4 years the government is spending more on education, more on super than in the whole of the education system. Mr Speaker, no wonder record numbers of people are leaving to Australia without hope.
The Honourable Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr.